now we are talking about, firstly, let's khuluma ngokuthi there is a need to legitimize culture and human rights. We mean that there was a need to talk about culture and the values that they hold and its link to human rights. And then secondly, we're now trying to find an equal standing point of universalism, of law, of politics and culture. Okay, now we're moving forward to now talking about the constitutional and the legal basis of human rights in Africa. So now, since we are on a mission of trying to find a link between culture and human rights, trying to make it equal or trying to make it to be in equal standards with human rights, we are now trying to find space for it in the Constitution. Okay. So now the third one is that one goal of the national constitutions and applicable human rights laws in many African countries has been the establishment of a regime of minimal universal human rights standards founded on the diverse cultural and religious orientations of the people. Questions remain, however, as to how best to strike the delicate balance between individual human rights, standard guaranteed by the state, and the collective cultural human rights claimed by groups. Okay, so now we'll see, most cultures do not see individuals as individuals. Most cultures consider tribes and a group of people together as one. It does not promote individualism, but it promotes communal gatherings. So now, when you look at the constitutionality of human rights, we find that human rights, it talks to the individual, but not to a group of people. So now, when we are trying to make constitutional lendo ye culture, we find a barrier because it does not talk to individuals, but to a group of people. Do you understand the first point? And then it moves on to say, one instance of this is the tension and conflict between the constitutional guarantees of gender equality in national constitutions and the traditional status of women in many African cultures. That is the first point. Uthi, abantu besifazane in most tribes and in most cultures and traditions are not seen for their gender, and there is nothing that actually talks to them or fights for them. But the institution says specifically, let them be seen as equal to men. So now, since there is a clash between a culture and there is a clash between constitutional human rights, we find that now we have a problem. Okay, it moves on to say, another is the conflict between the constitutional guarantees of children's rights and pervasive cultural attitudes which encourage early marriages, forced marriages, and child labor. Understand? So there are cultures that actually encourage ukuthi ingane ayishade zisancane, but the constitution ithini ingane asingashadi, zisancane. And then khona ama-cultures akhuluma ngokuthi ingane kumele isebenze from a young age, but the constitution ithini child labor is wrong. So we find that when it comes to the issue of individuals such as women, individuals such as young children, and individuals such as labor and marriage, it finds a clash with most traditional cultural backgrounds and also African states. Yet a complementarity, if not an absolute congruence, of state laws and cultural norms is required if national human rights regimes are to gain grassroots acceptance. If they were to be seen in the equal standing of human rights in culture, they have to revise these three areas that have been touched upon: the area of child marriages, the area of child labor, and the area of women rights. So in most cultures, since this is seen to be not so recognized, it has to come to a point where certain tribes and traditions actually come to a point where they agree. No, actually, men and women deserve to be treated equally. that does not distort our culture. Yes, umuntu wesifazane kumele ahloniphe. Yes, umuntu wesifazane kumele aqhubeke ayidlale indima yakhe as umuntu wesifazane. But naye akabonwe ewumuntu njengendoda. Asisho ukuthi indoda ingabonakali indoda, at the same time sithi umuntu wesifazane angabonakali eyinto encane kunendoda, because the constitution says umuntu wesifazane as a few human being who embodies the same rights as a man. And then it talks about child labor. Also, there are cultures that actually encourage child labor. You'd find out in Africa, there are cultures where there is a family business day. And ingane sitshela sancane ukuthi ayibo zonke le inkomo lezi ezakho kumele uyisebenzele kwimali. But human rights says that child labor is wrong. Ingane umsebenzi wayo ukufunda. Manje we can revise that and say, okay, thina in this culture asilwi nokuthi ingane ayiye esikoleni. Ngane ayiye esikoleni, masise isikhathi esiright izoqhubeka with the family legacy. In that way, the culture is not distorted, and it also finds place in the constitution. And then it talks about child marriage. Child marriage is wrong in the sense that there are instances where poor families are taken advantage of by rich families when they go and marry ingane in those families. And those families agree because they want money and they want a means of bringing food into the house. Manje ithini ke lento le ithi asithole nathi a congruence, asithole indlela yokuthi sibalancise lento. Asithi ke ingane ayihamba esikoleni ivumele yona ukuthi okay masisifikile kwi-age ethize isingahamba kuyoshadela kuloyo muzi mawukuthi it is an arranged marriage. Kodwa angabe ukuthi ingane isizoshada khona ibe isiqela sakhona isancane ingakabi nalo ithuba lokuthi nayo iqhubekele phambili iyofunda. In that way, we find that if we are to do away with child labor, child marriage, and seeing women as equal to men, we find space in the constitution. Therefore, once we are legitimizing a culture and linking it to human rights, we'll then find an equal standing with human rights and the constitution, and therefore we can say culture and traditions and its values have got a constitutional standing with human rights hand in hand. Are we still together? Okay. It's again, there is an assumption that insofar as national human rights standards enshrined in national constitutions reflect a collective national conscience, they present a higher order of human aspirations with a more effective mechanism for promotion and enforcement. They also provide a higher set of standards by which the various cultural traditions can be judged. For this reason, it is understandable that national human rights laws take precedence over customary or cultural practices, at least in theory. The principle of the supremacy of national constitutions ensures that in legal interpretation, national human rights guarantees that take precedence over any other laws or customary rules. This position is made clear in the South African Constitution, which provides expressly that no law, whether as a rule of common law, customary law, or legislation, shall limit any right entrenched in the Constitution. Sekuthiwa ngisho ama-cultures angaba nawo ama-customs awo awekho ama-customs adlula umthetho we-constitution. A constitution is what? The highest rule of law in all the land, particularly in South Africa. So as much as certain cultures may practice child marriage, child labor, and the unequal and biasness of women, the law protects them. Understand? So in that way, we find now there is a challenge to these traditions and these cultures, or to the people who continuously practice these traditions and cultures even though there is the law. And we find that the victims of these cultures and traditions have got a say and they've got a place in the constitution. Okay. The reality, however, is not quite as simple. That's why the constitution, as much as it is in is equal before the eyes of the law, and the Constitution is the highest rule of law. It is like that in theory, because there are still societies where they practice child labor, child marriages, and an unequal biasness toward women. Once again, sometimes the Constitution gives no indication whether fundamental rights supersede customary law or vice versa. He notes, for instance, that constitutions of Zimbabwe, Swaziland, and Botswana provide that the application of African customary law is not subject to the prohibition on discrimination contained in the Constitution. Thus, ambiguities remain over how to uphold national human rights standards in practice against the background of the prevalence and dominance of customary practices which conflict with these standards. Ukuthi ikuphi inkinga yokuthi si-constitutionalize i-customary law and i-human rights law? Maskhuluma nge-customary law, we're talking about traditions and cultures and their values and the laws that come with our traditions and the cultures. Ukuthi-ke inkinga iba la. I-Constitution, as much as it is stipulating that iyona law enkulu kunayo yonke ama-laws above customary law, ayisho ukuthi okay, how do we now practice this since there are societies that actually still practice these values that we've been talking about? It does not provide a way forward, and it does not provide a clear solutions to these problems. And because it does not provide clear solutions to these problems, we now find these ambiguities or these confusions continue still. So how do we now take a confusing tradition